Welcome to the Comfort via Discomfort podcast. My name is Adam Beaumier, and I am so happy and grateful that you're here with me right now. Embracing discomfort has literally saved my life, and it's now my mission through this podcast to help others around the world lean into discomfort and vulnerability so that they can live their best life. Welcome to episode 18 of the CVD podcast with Hannah Slater. Get ready to get inspired because this young woman is 19 years old. She's an entrepreneur that deals with ADHD and anxiety. And if that wasn't enough, she is a boxer that is training for the Paris 2024 Olympics. And she has a dream to one day fight in the UFC. I know it's a lot. And it didn't take long for me to get inspired by Hannah. So I know that it's not going to take you long either. In this episode, she talks about how this dream ever started, and a little spoiler alert, but not really. It started back when she was 8 years old and she was being bullied, and her dad was like, all right, what can we do about this? All right, let's put you in some form of self-defense. And it was not very long until Hannah fell in love with the art of MMA and was actually very good at it. So it just kind of spiraled from there. And she has been training ever since. And in this episode, she talks not only about the power of discomfort, but also the power of consistency and discipline. And let me tell you, I am so impressed just listening to her. And every time that we've talked so far, she teaches me something new about how discipline and consistency can affect your life. And so if you've ever heard that story, like one step at a time, or that saying, one step at a time, she is really the definition of this. So she talks about the power of discipline, consistency, discomfort, but she also talks about the struggles of ADHD and anxiety and how she's really overcome that and really turned things into her strengths when it comes to not only being a boxer and an MMA fighter, but also being an entrepreneur and just dealing with her day-to-day life. So like I said, get ready to be inspired. Here we go. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the CVD podcast. I'm here with my friend, Hannah Slater. Hannah, it's so nice to have you on.
Yes, thank you. I'm so happy to be on.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. We've known each other for like a month now, maybe less than that.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit, which is really interesting. I love having new people on the podcast because, we've had just a couple conversations about your story, and immediately I was really inspired by your story. And I was like, we need to share this. We need to get you on the podcast, and we need to share this because super, super cool. So why don't you start off with just a little introduction about who Hannah is as a person, and then I'll give maybe a little bit more context around how we met, and then we'll sort of dive into your story.
For sure. So I'm 19. I might as well put context into how old I am, because for me, my first podcast, who knows down the line how many I have. But
nice.
Yes.
Oh, you're gonna have a ton. You're gonna have a ton.
Yeah,
I can see it.
Yeah, but I've been a mixed martial artist for 11 years now. In September, which is pretty cool. Pretty introverted actually most of the time. I seem extroverted, but I'm introverted. I play airsoft for fun on weekends, and nice. I don't know. I have two fluffy dogs that are probably one of my biggest supporters outside of my parents for snuggle times.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And what are your dogs' names?
So Daisy is the 11-year-old, and she's a beagle / Chihuahua. Like, she looks adorable, but it's an interesting mix. I know, it's weird.
Chihuahua. I don't know if I've ever seen a beagle.
She barks. So she's sassy like a Chihuahua, but she barks and like has the food drive of a beagle.
Nice. All right.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Rebel, he's our German Shepherd, we think, or King Shepherd. He's very fluffy, and we got him not long ago, but he's 4, and he picked me over my dad, which I'm like, yeah, it's my dog.
That's always my dad's. That's always the battle, right? It's always the battle, like who the pet is gonna pick. Right now, currently, my kitten is definitely like a daddy's girl. She loves to cuddle with me, and my wife gets mad about it sometimes. So I can relate. It's like
Yeah.
you're like, yes,
Like,
a little
it's
bit.
just slight pride. Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. And what do you do for work as well?
I'm a financial broker and part-time admin assistant for my parents.
Nice, nice. So into the family business.
Yes.
That's awesome. And so at 19, you're a financial broker, and you've been doing MMA for like 11 years, which is really cool. And just a little bit of context around how you and I met. So if nobody's heard, if there's somebody on the podcast who hasn't heard of Yes Theory, you should definitely check them out on YouTube because they're awesome. They are all
Yes.
about seeking discomfort is their thing. They are a very, very popular group of individuals who go around the world seeking discomfort and telling stories about it. So amazing group of individuals that I've followed for a long time. And they actually partnered with an individual by the name of Anders, who is what we call the Iceman. He is the first person to ever run a triathlon, or sorry, an Ironman in Antarctica, which is insane. Like, that's wild. And so Anders is the first ever sponsored seeker or sponsored person by Yes Theory. And so they went with him to Antarctica. They sent a film crew and everything to actually document everything. And they're currently about to sort of release the premiere date of Iceman, which is going to be insane.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, so am I. It's an amazing story. I mean, I'm sure we've both watched the trailer, and it's just insane. It's just so wild.
Gives me chills every time. Chills.
No pun intended, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it gives me chills. It gets me super hyped up. And it's an amazing story to show everybody around the world like what's actually possible. So they didn't have like a big like production company or anything like pay for everything. So what they've done is that they've released a set amount of tickets out to their community, and they said, hey, for $50 you can buy a ticket and become like a partner of the film. And with that $50, you get to join us every Sunday for like this little online meetup on Zoom. It's only about 30 or 45 minutes long every Sunday, but you get to talk with Anders, who is the guy who actually ran the Ironman in Antarctica, and you get to talk with a couple of the people from Yes Theory. And every week they have a different topic, and they get to basically, share different perspectives. And then we, as the audience, get to like come on camera and ask them questions, which is super cool. Super, super cool. And so you and I both bought tickets, and we're both partners of this film, which is amazing. Yeah. And I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago, we were both on, and I raised my hand and asked a question, and they made a comment about my microphone. And that's when I said, oh yeah, I host a podcast. So I told them what it was about. And then you came on and asked a question later on. And I was like, that is super cool. Like, you want to be in the UFC? Like, this is wild. Like, so me and you met up and talked for like 30 or 45 minutes afterwards. Yeah. And I was like, we got like pretty far into the conversation. And then I was like, wait, hold on a second. How old are you? And you're like 19. I was like, oh my God, this makes everything even more incredible. So like, it was awesome. And it was inspiring because, I mean, so when you did your introduction, you mentioned that you've been doing MMA for 11 years. I always will brag about like the guests that are on this show because it's so much fun. So Hannah has not only been in MMA for 11 years, but she's training for the Paris 2024 Olympics in boxing right now. So badass, absolute badass. I'm super excited to have you on. And again, through our conversations, like some really important things came up, and I'm really excited to sort of dive into them with you. So anything that you want to add about how we met before we jump into your story?
Oh, no, it was more so, I came on and asked my question. My heart was racing because I got to ask Anders a question. Yeah, and then same. Not that long after we finished, I'm hyped because my mom was in the background, actually. She's behind the camera. But then you messaged me and you were like, oh my God, I loved your story and all that. And I was like, oh, no way. And then you were like, do you want to be on, like, do you want to chat and connect and see if you want to be on my podcast? And I was like, no, like, are you serious? Like, I was like, oh my goodness. So then I definitely jumped on that opportunity because it's definitely super fun to say, hey, I got to record a podcast episode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Absolutely. And like I said, really excited to like get your story out there because I think that it's really cool and motivating and inspiring that you're so young doing all of these things. And I mean, obviously, you know, through our little talk, you've been through some stuff, and like where this thing ever started with MMA was really interesting. So really
Mm-hmm.
excited to like spread the message. And you know, once you're famous and in the UFC and in the you know,
Yeah.
Paris Olympics and everything, you know, I can say, hey, she was, you know, the first podcast that she ever did
Yeah.
was this one.
I tell all my friends about this. They're going to be so hyped.
Hey, there you go. There you go. Love it. Awesome. So why don't we get into things? So you said
Mm-hmm.
11 years that you've been in MMA, and you said that, you know, it started out of this need to get into self-defense when you were about 8 years old. So why don't you tell me a little bit about, you know, what sparked this and where this sort of idea came from?
Yeah. So roughly it was second grade-ish, I think, off the top of my head. My friend had to leave my elementary school because he was getting bullied by this kid bad, super bad. And then once he left, the bully kind of turned to target on me, and it got to the point where it wasn't verbal anymore. He was physically starting to just pick at me, like all that stuff. So, and funny enough, around that time, it was Jaden Smith's Karate Kid that came out. And I saw him defending himself and beating up the bullies. And I was like, oh, if he can do that, I can do that. So not that long after, my cousin was already in a club. So we kind of just joined in there. And I kind of just stuck with it to the point where not even a month into training, they had their in-house tournament. I did it. I got 2 silvers, and then not even a couple days after that, I was joined into their tournament class, and I was already at a tournament 2 weeks after that, and it kind of just stuck with it, kept rolling, and so on and so forth. And the self-defense kind of just grew and came with that. And yeah, yeah, just to say, I was told not to expect anything much from my first like out of town tournament.
Yeah.
My coach was like, hey, like, don't expect much, just you're here for fun. And I ended up getting, I think, a gold and a bronze that day. And he was like, oh, never mind. Like, and I was consistent after that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, okay, Hannah's good. This girl's good.
Yeah, this little girl who's smaller than she should be for her age. It's not that bad.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome. And so like within like a month and a half, like you had already started like getting into tournaments and really sort of achieving some things in these tournaments.
Yeah, I was like, oh, my whole thing is, oh, I'll just try it and we'll see.
Yeah. You know, I gotta ask. I know this is going to be sort of like a you know, funny sort of question, but like, do you ever go back to that bully and just like, bam, punch him in the face or something?
Funny enough, a year after I joined, that bully actually left the school and didn't come back till grade 6. And then he was actually a whole different kid. Like at that point, he apologized and all that. So no, I never did go back and wham a bully. I've actually been very good at keeping my hands to myself unless I'm in a ring or an octagon of sorts.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So the bully left for a year. We have no idea where he went, but he came back, and, and he wasn't necessarily a bully anymore. So he apologized and everything, which was really interesting. So, you know, back when you were 8, I don't know, you know, how many of these things that you remember, but what did you, what can you speak about in terms of like joining these self-defense classes? Were you scared? Were you excited? Like, what was that sort of feeling like when you all of a sudden sort of join these things?
Well, definitely nervousness because it's a new space that I'm not used to, but I kind of connected with all the other kids in the class pretty quick. Like, just kids connect easily together, but over time it just became a routine thing. I was like, I can't miss class now. I'm like, I gotta go. And to the point where I just kept rolling and rolling with the punches and just kept going. Pun intended.
Oh, that's awesome. And your dad's in MMA as well. Is that correct?
So my dad trains fighters. Yeah, he does train. Okay. Yeah. So he was a boxer himself. He used to train hockey fighters as well. And
oh, cool.
I was originally started boxing when I was like 5, but I didn't last too long in that because I was the shortest kid in the class and I can't run stairs with the tiny legs I had. So yeah, I was stuck with a lot of different sports back then. I kind of was a lot of trial and error.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
so was it your dad that pushed you into like these self-defense classes, or was it you watching Karate Kid being like, okay, I need to defend myself like this. Like there's something that I can do about it. And you kind of went to
Yeah.
your parents and was like, I want to do this.
It was kind of a mix of both.
Okay.
Every person in my family has kind of taken some form of self-defense, whether it was from my mom taking judo to, my dad doing boxing and just taekwondo and my cousins and all that. So it was just kind of a family thing that they decided, oh, you got to learn at least something to defend yourself.
Yeah. And where did that philosophy come from? Was this sort of like a mandatory thing where it was like all the kids have to learn some sort of self-defense? Like where did that might have come from?
I would say that came from probably my great uncle and my grandfather. They were or my great grandfather, both great uncle and great grandfather. They were very orientated towards keeping yourself safe towards any situation that you could handle and being calm when like everything hits the fan. You're still calm, you understand what's going on, and you can keep your head straight. That was kind of their philosophies because they came from military backgrounds.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Great. I think that's a great skill to have. And as I mentioned the first time that we actually had a conversation, I was like, I've thought intermittently about joining some sort of gym to get some sort of self-defense, because I think that would be really interesting, so that you actually have some awareness of like what's going on and what to do when you said like you said, when shit hits the fan, like what do I do about it, right? So I haven't done that yet, but maybe that's something that I do very, very in the near future, because I think that's something that I've thought about quite often, and definitely something that's useful, right? It sticks with you for the rest of your life, whether you become, an Olympic boxer or not. It's going to be something that's useful.
Yeah, it gives you confidence in situations that are unsure, and it kind of helps build up your intuition and your gut feeling. I feel like for sure, because the other day, my mom and I were in a Marshall's and I had a bad gut feeling in the purse section. So we ended up leaving, and not even 10 minutes later, a lady left the store with a handful of bags and like got in a car and ran away. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I trusted my gut there. It was right.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring that up, like these sort of byproducts of learning sort of self-defense. You said confidence and expanding or sort of expanding or training like your intuition, and also like really trusting your gut feeling. And so like you joined this gym at like 8 years old. When do you know, or it's difficult because you're so young, but like when did you start to realize these things? Like when did you start to gain confidence or intuition, or like really start to like trust your gut a little bit more? Like was that sort of right away, or did this take sort of years to develop?
It was definitely something later down the road, because at the start you're like, oh, I'm learning how to kick and punch things really well, but the self-defense comes later down the road, because my club did teach every single year bully self-defense and like almost a kidnapping, like stay away from strangers kind of self-defense. And over time it was, you picked up on, like I don't have the greatest feeling, maybe I'll turn and go the other way, and then something happens like not even that long after, and you're like, okay, it's definitely a developed habit, because you're watching, you're aware. And it's also kind of a habit my dad's helped me develop over the years, because he was very towards, when we were watching action movies, he's always like, okay, you see this situation, like this is how you would react. And then we judge action movies on the realism of fight scenes now too. And we're like, well, why would you do that? I'm like, okay, well, the military wasn't deployed at the right time. Like we're very critical on it, and it's very funny. It's like our whole goal.
That's really interesting. And it's so, I mean, through anything that you do, whether it's like a new job or taking kickboxing or joining a club like this and learning self-defense, it's so interesting how these things can just change the way that you look at the world. And now you're seeing things that you never necessarily saw before because you're being sort of trained and you're putting yourself in an environment to like really look for these things. And now you're critiquing action movies on their realism.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah, we even tried to, when we watch UFC fights, we try to say something before Joe Rogan or Michael Bisping, and they're like, oh, this person's like this reaction to this habit they have fighting, and my dad and I like, oh, we picked that up like 30 seconds ago. You're a little behind, bud.
That's hilarious. That's so funny. You're just watching and analyzing.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. I was told that from the very beginning is you sit and watch your opponents to pick up on their habits. And I got good at that. By the time I was 14, 15, I was already picking up on it. And I would annoy other teammates because I was like, hey, well, you didn't notice this. They're like, well, I wasn't trying to. And I was like, I can't do much for you. Yeah. I'm like, well, I told you and you didn't listen. So
yeah, no, that's really interesting. And yeah, it's a lot about pattern recognition, right? It's about like understanding how they're moving and maybe if they give like little tips in terms of like what their next move is going to be. Is that the type of stuff that you would look for? Yeah.
So it's a lot of rhythm. It's like everyone said, it's like fighting's like dancing. It is actually like dancing. It's a lot of rhythm based habits that you have. And there's a certain rhythm. Maybe one person likes to jump 2 times forward, 1 time back, like all that kind of stuff, or to that motion of how their hands circling to the point where you can time it to jab them and catch them when their hands down. Like it's just a repetitive watching to be able to pick up on those habits very quickly. It did take a long time for that as well, because it took several hundreds probably of fights I watched and rewatching my own to pick up on habits and tells.
Yeah, of course. That would take a quite a long time to train your eyes to be able to see that in a speed where you can actually do something about it. Like take advantage of like the little movements that they make. That's really, really interesting. So, I mean, you joined a tournament within a couple months of actually joining this club. You started winning some things. So take me through a little bit of your like MMA journey. I know that you said that you did 4 years of Kempo, if I remember correctly. Yes. Right. So take me through a little bit of your MMA journey, and where did this desire to join the UFC come from?
So it's originally started because of the bullying. So I joined a martial art called Shaolin Kempo, and I did that for 4 years roughly. I had my green belt by the time I was watching a lot of, funny enough, WWE, but then because I'd get bored of dad watching UFC, and then eventually I started watching it with him, and then I started noticing that Ronda Rousey joined, and it's a woman, not a bunch of guys. And then it just kept growing from there, and to the point where I was watching one of Ronda's fights, and I looked and I went, well, if she's a girl and I'm a girl, I can do that. So then I looked at my dad and said, I want to fight in the UFC. And he went, really? I'm like, yeah, I want to fight in the UFC. So not even that long after, he's texting a buddy of his who owns a jiu-jitsu gym, and I started training Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And then it continued on a couple years after doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Kempo. I ended up joining kickboxing club, and that was kickboxing, Muay Thai. And then it went to wrestling, and I did high school wrestling. And then, boxing came just last year in August. So I've almost been doing full-time boxing for a year now. But yeah, that's kind of my progression of the storyline. It was developing habits that needed to be developed. So being more aggressive on the ground with wrestling, and then knowing how to choke people on the ground with jiu-jitsu. Kempo brought my kicks into the play. Boxing is sharpening up my punches. And then Muay Thai is kind of using my other limbs for my elbows and my knees, because those are also viable weapons.
Yes, they definitely are. And it's really interesting. I love that you're trying to approach this sort of trying to be a well-rounded fighter. I don't follow UFC or boxing rigorously, but when I do, they're trying to point out like the sort of, oh, this guy's a great striker, but he's not great on the ground. Sort of thing. So it's really interesting. And what I really find interesting is that you said, we identified the habits that I need to form, and then went backwards and said, what form, like what method of training is actually going to get me to develop those habits, which is really interesting. Is that something that you're that you as an individual were keen on, or did that come from coaching? Where did that sort of training method come from?
So that would be my dad and his style of coaching, making sure that everyone's sharp in every spot. So he picks up on your weaknesses and he'll make you develop them till they're perfect, but he doesn't make you stop there. He lets you continue going on till it becomes a creative process where you kind of just sit there in your own mind and go, okay, well, I can do this from here, and then I can add this on, and then I can do this. Like, it just kind of, it allows you to think 6 to 7 steps ahead, which is what makes most people a very dominant fighter. But I would definitely give credit to him. He was the one that's like, okay, so why don't we start doing this to improve this? And I was like, okay, sure. I just kind of go with the flow. I'm like, I'll listen and I'll just do what you say.
Wow, really interesting. And so, through those different forms, like, was there any sort of training, whether it was Muay Thai or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or one of those? Like, which one was the most difficult one to get into? Like, what was the most uncomfortable one to get into, and why was it so difficult?
Most difficult one to get into. I'm like, I don't want to, because they're all good
or
sports.
The biggest learning curve, I guess.
Biggest learning curve would be, I would say, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it comes later down the line. So you start and you learn your techniques and you're like, okay, great, I know the techniques. Now we're going to throw you into sparring, and now we're going to make you think about where you can apply these techniques, to the point where I'm sitting now with my knowledge towards Jiu-Jitsu. It took for 8 years I've been doing that now, 8-9 years roughly, but it took me a very long time to sit there and be like, okay, I can do this from here, I can do this, or I can try this from here. Like, it takes a long time to develop that creative process behind the theories of jiu-jitsu instead of the techniques. You can be great at techniques, you can be perfect at them, but if you can't apply them in a manner that flows, then it doesn't really work out that well for you, and you get mostly choked out or other times submitted or just done by points.
Wow, really interesting. So understanding the theories and the techniques, but then combining them into being able to like sort of flow from one thing to another. So it essentially, if you're like really rigid, I guess, or kind of like stiff in your movements, then you're just going to get taken advantage of.
Yeah, my favorite move, funny enough, is the arm bar, because Ronda Rousey would do arm bars, but I've gotten so rigorously good at it that now it's just minute details that we're fixing. Maybe I move my feet a couple centimeters this way instead of that way, or maybe I bend the arm just a little bit. Like, it just becomes like tiny, tiny different changes into your technique that changes your game entirely.
Yeah, no kidding. There's so many like little tiny things that you can do to adjust it. And I'm glad you mentioned Ronda Rousey again, because I mean, again, during our the first time that we chatted, this came up, and I was like, have you watched the documentary? And you're like, yeah, of course I have.
Yeah.
So like, why? I mean, I know that you said that Ronda Rousey, inspired you because you said to yourself, like, if I can see her doing it, like if she can do it, then I can do it, type of thing. It was more about like seeing that a woman was in the UFC. What else about Ronda Rousey was like really, really inspiring or motivating for you to kind of challenge this norm, or to get into UFC as a young woman?
So a lot of my love for Ronda came as I read her book. It came kind of developed a little bit more, but she faced a lot of adversity towards herself in her sport. She was trying to live a life outside of sports, but it was kind of just so intertwined that it was hard to do both. But she eventually figured out a way to do both at the same time and just kind of deal with those adversities, be able to push past them to the point where you are the most successful in your sport and no one can deny that you are the most successful in your area. Like, I don't know, it's just this fascination behind this strong, powerful woman that developed and faced so much adversity, from judo to MMA world, and Joe Rogan being like, women will never fight in the UFC, and all of a sudden she's fighting in the UFC. It's just, she carried the flag for all of us, I feel like.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. And you talk about like the balance between living the life, but also like training rigorously to obviously be like the most successful person that you can be. And you mentioned to me that there was sort of a turning point for you a few years ago when you were also trying to like really, I mean, you've always been trying to sort of balance these two things. And then you mentioned 3 years ago that you burnt out, and that this was a big piece of adversity for you to overcome. So why don't we sort of switch gears? You take me through a little bit about like what this burnout was, why this came to be, what your sort of life looked like what led up to the burnout, and then we can sort of dive into sort of what you learned from that experience and how you've been able to apply it moving forward.
So, yeah, that was 2019, like kind of August. Like I just finished my, I think, fifth international tournament for Shaolin Kempo, and I had some funny hiccups there. I was competing in one division. They called my other division in the ring right beside me and didn't tell the ring admins they moved my division. So I ended up having to compete the next day. But I was very upset. I was crying because I was like, I just worked 8 months for this. But I just came off of that summer and I went into my grade 11 year of high school. And I had a lot of courses. Like I took on a lot more because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to go into kinesiology or a business school. So I was kind of all over the place. But eventually when it came around time to wrestling season, it took on a lot more time and effort for me to put in because I was a team captain for the women's side and more so, doing that and then trying to prep. I was supposed to do two jiu-jitsu tournaments in Vegas that summer. So I was prepping for that as well. So my year was kind of packed. I was trying to complete high school. I was trying to do wrestling captain to the point of where I was taking on so much pressure and external expectations from other people in the community that I just gave up. I lost the spark that I had for wrestling and I kind of went, okay, I need to step back. I need to reevaluate because I'm kind of all over the place. Like I watched, funny enough, a CrossFit documentary with my dad and my mom, and I just started crying because I was like, oh, like I'm so stressed, like these, like, and I'm very inspired by CrossFit because I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I haven't done it. Like I'm terrified. It looks scary, but I love watching it. But I was like, oh, and I would cry so much that year to the point where I told my parents I'm dropping out of wrestling and I'm going to try and figure out what the heck's happening with school and just move on from that point. And then kind of the world shut down, not even a week after my birthday. Yeah. Like it's like, oh, the world shut down on March 14th. And I'm like, oh, secret birthday plug. No one knows about it. But the world kind of shut down and it forced me to stop everything. I actually started getting more sleep. I started sleeping more so 8 to 9 hours instead of 5 to 6. I wasn't working out as rigorously. I wasn't working almost a whole 24 hours a day. Not a day. Working out for 24 hours, don't recommend. But working out almost 24 hours in a week was, I don't know how I did it.
So sorry to jump in here, but so take me through like a little bit of like what your daily or weekly schedule sort of look like leading up to the burnout, because you said that you were working out for about 24 hours a week. So what does that look like on a sort of day-to-day basis as a grade 11 high school student, but also somebody who's training so much? What does that look like?
Yeah, so that was I worked out in the morning for Monday to Friday with school because I was in a sports academy, which allowed my schedule to be a little more flexible. But I was working out I would work out an hour in the morning and then I'd do all my schoolwork and I'd either get out at 2 or 3 o'clock, depending on my schedule. I'd go home, nap for a little bit, and then I'd come back and then I had wrestling practice. So I'd wrestle and we'd usually have an hour, 45-minute wrestling practice. And then depending on the night, either I went to jiu-jitsu or Kempo. And if I was teaching, I would be at Kempo for at least, I'd say 3-4 hours, all depended. And then jiu-jitsu, I was there for an hour and a half. And then that was usually 4 evenings of the week.
Just listening to this.
That was 4 evenings of the week. So that was typically Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday, if I had international training for Kempo, I'd be training, but I didn't at the time. So it was my rest day, thankfully. And then Saturdays, I would be training from 10 o'clock till 3 or 4 in that whole day. So I'd be training, I don't even know, like almost 5-6 hours and then just a Saturday. And then Fridays and Sundays were my rest days. So I'd be sleeping a lot on those days and
Oh,
eating.
you did have rest days. Oh, thank goodness.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's a jam-packed schedule.
Yeah.
Training in the morning, going to school, training at night. That's intense.
And somehow figuring out where to put homework in there.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Lot of, yeah, that's a lot of stuff. So when, obviously, I mean, just hearing about the numbers and stuff like that, obviously we can sort of, see how that might have led to burnout. But like, when was there a moment that like you hit the wall? Like what happened to signal to yourself that like you're burnt out, you need to take a break? What was it that happened that really set that in motion for you?
So it kind of started at like, I wasn't even a couple months into wrestling as a coach, and I was like, oh my gosh, my team is all over the place. Like they're not head straight. Like I was all over and I couldn't keep up with them. They're causing so much drama and I was taking it on, and I was just like, I love you guys, but like, I can't deal with this. And it just built up to the point I was discussing in with my friends in the lunch car every time at lunch, we'd eat together in the car. And I was like, hey, I can't do this with wrestling. I'm considering quitting. And they're like, go ahead, do whatever makes you happy and takes a load off of you, to the point where I ended up talking to my parents about it. They're like, okay, let it sit for a little bit. And if you're still hard on your decision, then go ahead. So I sat on it for a month and I was like, no, I'm done. So I dropped it. I told my coaches respectfully, I'm like, I have too much on my plate right now. And I kind of needed to take something off. And they're like, okay, totally get it. Understand. And then it came to COVID hitting, not even a month after I quit, that it was, okay, maybe I was burnt out because I started sleeping a lot. Like I said, I was sleeping 8 to 9 a night, but I was sleeping another 2 to 3 during the day. Like I was gassed out. My body was finally recovering. I haven't actually felt any of my injuries previously. Like in the last 3 years, all my injuries have actually recovered because I haven't been putting so much stress on my body that I haven't allowed it to recover properly. And it just, over time, I was like, oh yeah, I was very, very burnt out. Like I was putting too much stress on myself.
Yeah, it's really interesting how that happens. Sometimes it can happen gradually. Sometimes it can like smack you in the face. And for you, it sounds like it wasn't until you were able to get rest that you were like, oh my goodness, this is what it's supposed to feel like. I was definitely like pushing way too hard back then, which is really interesting. And I mentioned to you that I've experienced burnout a couple times. And the first time was in 2015. I was just pushing myself way too hard for like a social impact project. And once I burnt out, like I was sleeping like 10 hours a day and I was still exhausted. Like, I don't know about you, but I was for 3 or 4 weeks, like 10 hours a day sleeping, and I was still exhausted. Like I felt like I had no energy left. So your body, like it's so interesting because like your body's a supercomputer and it sends you signals all the time, but oftentimes we just push them to the side. Like, no, I need to get through this. I need to get through this, right? Type of thing. And then all of a sudden, sometimes there's like this even bigger signal that's just like, no, you need to stop.
Yeah, my big signal was COVID, but
yeah, which is really interesting that that's what it took for you to be able to actually slow down. Because if it wasn't for COVID, then obviously things would have been running as normal and you may have been, still trying to push through all of that stuff to be able to train the way that you needed to train.
Yeah, it definitely made me more self-aware towards my body and reactions towards things. I notice if my shoulders are tense and I have to relax, I have a constant reminder on my watch that says, keep calm, take a deep breath. And that's when my reset is just, oh, okay, we can keep going. Like I was getting tense, and it's just a nice quick reminder on my watch that's like, okay, relax. And I'm like, okay, back into it. And just, it took forever to build those, like being able to read those messages from my body again. And I'm much more aware of it now. But if you're having constant low back pain from martial arts, maybe take a couple steps back, because I don't recommend it whatsoever.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my goodness. Though when you say lower back pain, it instantly jogs a memory. The second time that I burnt out was in 2020. I was training for my second marathon, and I was having a lot of lower back pain because I was training, I don't know, anywhere between 6 to 10 hours a week, but also working, I don't know, somewhere between 50 and 60 hours a week for consulting company because we were working remotely at the time during the pandemic. And eventually, like for the first month, training was fine. Second month, lower back was like hurting. And anytime I'd start running, I could feel like compression on my lower spine, and I ignored it. And then eventually just totally burnt out. And like my lower back was shot. Like I had trouble like lifting 40 pounds. Like it wasn't good at all. So pay attention to those signals because they they mean something.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Like,
and I'm really happy. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was like, sorry. I was like, I don't know how much physio I did that I was trying to fix it, and it didn't click that maybe you're putting too much stress on it that you haven't recovered yet. Like that doesn't count my ankles and my like knees and all that because I've been running barefoot on mats for 11 years. So
Yeah, no kidding. So it gets to a point where it's like, maybe it's not the after part that I need to focus on. Maybe it's like the before and during part where I need to like really assess whether or not this is the right way to do it.
yeah,
But I'm really happy that you've learned to become more self-aware and pay attention to your body and the signals and whatnot. Because again, like we talked about, there's always these graphics online that show like your comfort zone in the middle, and then your sort of discomfort zone a little bit further out, and then your sort of growth zone. And that's where usually the graphic ends. And people don't put in the burnout zone, which is a little bit further than that, because obviously if you're putting yourself into stressful situations constantly, or you're constantly in this discomfort or growth zone, that's not healthy either. And eventually you push yourself into this burnout zone. But sometimes it takes that to understand sort of where your limits are, or to give you these lessons of like, hey, pay attention to these signals because they're important. So it's unfortunate, but it's also fortunate that some of us go through these burnout moments. And was there anything else that you really learned from going through that experience that has really helped you moving forward?
I would say it's understanding how to balance your schedule very well. As I'm very schedule orientated, but it was too much on my plate at the time. And now I've understood that, hey, maybe just 1 hour and a half training session in the evening is enough. I don't need to do 3 hours. I don't need to do 4 hours. I've stretched 6, but just doing an hour and a half to focus on this one specific thing and then allow myself to rest afterwards. Because without the rest, there is no learning. There's just distraction. It's like, oh, shiny. Oh, I'm gone. Like just easy as that, because your brain isn't focused purely on what you love. It's just somewhere else because you lost your spark for that little bit.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The rest will allow you to be more present and to like really pay attention to what you want to pay attention to rather than like chasing the shiny objects. Love that message. So you've gone through a bunch of different training, like forms of training, Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, boxing, and whatnot. You've experienced this type of burnout 3 years ago in 2019. And now, as I sort of mentioned kind of earlier during the intro, is that you're training for Paris 2024 Olympics in boxing. So where the heck did that come from? Right? You're like, I want to be in the UFC, and now you're like, okay, boxing, Paris 2024 Olympics. So how are these? I know this is a habit that you are trying to develop. So, but the ultimate goal is UFC, or where does this sort of fit in your puzzle?
So UFC still the end goal, definitely. And if anyone doesn't know, the weight category would be strawweight. So I'm funny enough, it's 115 pounds, and I walk at 110. So I have some muscle to gain, but no. So the end goal is still UFC, but it kind of I was during the last Summer Olympics where they were all in, was it Tokyo? I can't remember. Yeah, look at me, my history. Yeah, the Tokyo Olympics. And my dad ended up watching the 50 kilo category, 110 pounds, just to clarify for those who don't know the different metrics. But yeah, he ended up watching that and kind of went, oh, these girls are all older, and Hannah can definitely beat them. So next thing I know, I get called into his office, and he said, so have you ever wanted to compete in the Olympics? And I went, yeah. And he's like, would you want to do it in boxing? And I'm like, yeah, let's just go for it. And he's like, yeah, you can. And the conversation went, well, you could definitely beat these girls. They're all older. They're like, and you just got to sharpen your skills up. I'm like, okay, Sure. So we called an old buddy of his who runs the gym here, and we ended up going into boxing. I got my medicals done so I could start sparring right away. And it kind of just started going from there because, as my dad puts it, he mostly would call my manager because he kind of keeps track of who I'm going to fight. But, I lost my train of thought.
That's all right. No worries. No worries. Hey, it happens sometimes. So
definitely.
So your dad was like, all right,
we went to the club,
you ever thought about,
started talking about it. Mm-hmm. And then, so there we go. His terms were, Dana White likes Olympians. Ronda Rousey was an Olympian. There was a couple others ones I have in there. Like, he likes people with previous experience. So we're like, if I can get my name out there in the Olympics and then say I want to go into UFC, I have a better shot of signing a better contract. So
there you go.
Yeah, that was kind of his thought process. He's like, he likes people with previous experience. So yeah, that's
previous experience, previous accolades, let's say.
Pizzazz, yes.
Yeah. There you go. Well, that's all right. Really interesting. So now you're training for the Paris 2024 Olympics in Boston, or in not Boston, in
Paris.
Boxing. Sorry.
Yeah, in boxing.
No, I meant to say, in boxing. I live in Boston. Sometimes I just blurt out the word.
Oh, you love it so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So training for Paris 2024 Olympics in boxing. Has that been like a really big shift for you? And take me through a little bit of like, it seems like you're so eager to just go from one thing to the other. You're just like, yeah, why not? Let's go to boxing. Or this is to develop a new habit. So like, yeah, sure. Let's do it. Like, how did you establish that sort of mindset that you're just like, okay, yeah, let's sort of go with the flow and let's do this to train for this type of thing. Yeah. How did you really develop that?
Yeah. So kind of changing plans is a common theme here because they're like, okay, maybe this isn't working. Let's try this. Like, the path is never straight. There's going to definitely be some wiggles. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be a couple bumps here and there. But we were going to try to go wrestle in the States and get like a scholarship to go there. But it was really hard because there's not a lot of opportunity where they pay you to go. They're like, we're going to put this out there and hope you come and you pay us to do this. And we're like, that's not the way we want to go. We don't love wrestling that much. So we kind of just stayed off that track and we kind of sticked with, okay, we're just going to focus on finishing school. And then we're going to go and kind of try and figure out how to get you into your MMA world, into your amateur fights to start. And then he came up with that idea for boxing, which kind of kickstarted the idea to keep going because COVID was a big setback. And because in my head, 12-year-old Hannah's like, I'm going to be doing this by the time I'm 18. And I'm like, nope, I'm 19 now. And I'm like, no, that was a bad idea. But yeah, so we kind of just went and we shift a lot, but luckily I had the sports psychologist at the time that was helping me kind of understand the basis behind my shifts and understanding my reactions towards things and dealing with my pre-fight anxiety. That part's excellent, but it's definitely natural because it's fight or flight. But yeah, jumping around a lot is more so we're just figuring out a game plan because plans change a lot. It's always pre-plan, commit, execute. Just like if you know who Jocko Willings is, that's his favorite thing to say. Pre-plan, commit to your plan, and then execute your plan like as best way as you can. Plans will change though. So we're used to kind of throwing ideas out and hoping something helps us along the way.
Yeah, really interesting. And so I don't know who Jocko Williams is. So who is Jocko
Willings? Is he's in the Navy and he's pretty cool. If you want, he has a couple books that are pretty good. There's called Discipline Equals Freedom. That's one of my favorite ones because discipline's a great thing to have in your life. And then he has so many other ones I can't keep track. My dad has them all. He absolutely loves Jocko. But yeah, he has an Instagram, but I love him. He's excellent.
Yeah, interesting. And I'm happy that you brought that up because obviously throughout this whole conversation, jam-packing your schedule and being in MMA for 11 years obviously takes a lot of discipline. And if you want to reach high level in anything, especially the Olympics, obviously, it's going to take a lot of discipline and consistency. Yeah. And, I whenever I hear discipline, I immediately hear Will Smith in my head because I watched one of his videos where he goes, at the center of every successful person is discipline, essentially. And so, maybe talk a little bit about, what discipline means to you and how, being disciplined, not only in fighting or in your training, how has that kind of affected your personal life? How has that helped you in other areas of your life, to get to where you are today?
Yeah. So discipline is a harder habit for me to build because I have ADHD. So my brain thinks 1,000 miles per hour, but I can only keep up at 2. So it's all
Good
over
way to
the place.
describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. But discipline for me has kind of helped keep track of where my brain is going. Because if I don't and I kind of let it go loose, I lose track and sight of the end goal and the big picture. And I kind of focus too much on the little problems instead of setting my GPS to the goal and just keeping it there, instead of just kind of, oh, maybe I'll try this or I'll try that. And just, yeah, but it comes a lot from habit building. It starts with building little habits, and then it goes into developing bigger ones. And maybe you set a goal. Maybe I want to squat 100 pounds. Maybe I want to bench press 100 pounds. Like, I am 100 pounds, so that's kind of a big goal for me. But yeah, and just kind of small habits built over time. But it's those discipline that trumps motivation. Discipline over time helps you get through those negative headspaces that you're in, or those tough challenges where you're feeling like, I don't know how this is going to go, but I'll just go try it. I'll just keep going. Because if you rely so much on motivation, you're looking for that little boast of inspiration. You're like, oh yeah, let's go do this. But that lasts like 2-3 days max. And then you're kind of back into the, oh, well, I don't know. Discipline trumps motivation all the time. Motivation's great to have, great to feel, but discipline's what gets you through those tough moments instead of relying on inspiration and stuff. That's what I feel like it is to me.
Yeah. No, I love that. I absolutely love that message. And like, you're just a 19-year-old spitting fire. I love it. I love it.
Just like Eminem.
Yeah, there you go. Just like Eminem. There you go. No, it's a great message. And it's something that throughout the podcast journey that I've been on, I hear time and time again, right? Motivation comes and goes. It's sort of, it's here sometimes, it's not here other times, right? It's like happiness. You can't be 100% happy. You can't be happy 100% of the time. You can't be motivated 100% of the time. But if you're disciplined and you establish that habit to be disciplined, it'll help you whether you have motivation or not. You can still sort of get things done, which is really, really interesting. And I'm glad, I'm happy you mentioned the part about having ADHD. And earlier on the Iceman call that we were on today, you got up and asked a question in front of everybody, and you had said, "Hey, I'm an entrepreneur with anxiety and ADHD," and then you proceeded to ask a question about how other individuals sort of deal with those things. So you want to take me through a little bit of, like, you touched a little bit on the ADHD, but you want to touch on the anxiety and ADHD, how that might affect your day-to-day life, and maybe how boxing and MMA and this sort of training has affected either of those things, how it helps you deal with either of those things in your day-to-day life.
Yeah. So I wasn't properly diagnosed with ADHD until just this year.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I was first diagnosed with anxiety when I was 16. That's when I was really stressed and taking all that stuff. I was put kind of that on first. And then we tried medication for that. I was like, this isn't working. I don't feel any different after the 8 months of trying the first medication and that next one. And I was like, okay, this isn't it. We need to dig deeper. And then my brother officially got diagnosed with ADHD. So then my mom did. So I'm like, okay, if it's genetic, I'm going to go see, because it will explain a lot. And then I did. And she was like, yeah, you definitely got it. We can try some stuff out and see. So I'm not saying medications for everybody. It took me a couple tries to find the right one. But it definitely helped a lot in kind of sorting my puzzle pieces a little better as I'm putting the picture together, instead of just kind of, oh, we're just going to smash it together and see what works. And for me, in the day-to-day basis, before I was properly diagnosed in class, because I was so tired, it was hard to keep focus. So I would start losing my train of thought. I would go, oh, well, if a penguin has an umbrella and it starts to rain, and then all of a sudden the penguin's purple and I'm in Australia. And I'm like, what is going on? So then I would force myself to backtrack in my head to how I got there. And then I'd be like, okay, you figured it out. Pay attention again. Like, you got to focus back on what you're doing and kind of the movements of what the coach is teaching. And then eventually it got better because I was still young. So it was kind of all over the place. And then the anxiety came when I started taking on everyone's expectations towards needing to be the best, because I was the best for how long. And everyone's just kind of either was expecting me to be silver or gold, or everyone was expecting me to lose because I was beating their people so much. So it was just kind of a weird balance between the two that I was trying to figure out. I had people telling me, oh, you should quit MMA and come wrestle, or you should like not try the UFC and go try this thing out. And I was like, no, I want to do this. You're not going to tell me I can't do that, because I hate when people tell me, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do 10 pull-ups. No, I'm going to do 10 pull-ups now. This is my goal. Like, you can't tell me no. Because if you tell me no, I'm going to try and beat you at it. Because I'm like, no. Yeah, it just kind of, it took time for all that to develop. Again, I saw a sports psychologist during COVID, which helped with the anxiety part of my competitions. So my heart rate doesn't get to 150 before I'm in the ring and adrenaline dump. It's a little more calm. I'm probably at 110, 120. I've tracked it a couple times to make sure, but it's not as bad as before.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that sports psychologist like really helped you with sort of pre-fight to be able to sort of relax your body a little bit?
So a lot of it is grounding techniques. I usually kind of get in my head and I'm in space. So it's kind of remembering keeping myself there. So I ever look at, funny enough, the textures on people's faces, from their hair to their mustaches. Sadly, wrinkles if they had some, but that's just kind of, I look at them and I'm like, okay, you're that, or your texture on your clothing, to the feeling of my gloves and my wraps in my hand, or to the feeling of my gi and my belts, like just keeping myself here and then breathing. I'd forget to breathe half the time and I'd be like, so it's just deep breath out and kind of being so, okay, you've trained for this. You know you have the skill for this. Just rely on your skills and be confident in them. Don't compare yourself to the outcome towards the skill that you have. Because half the guys in my gym are like, you know a lot more than you tell. And I'm like, yeah, I do, but you just don't let me brain puke it all out.
Yeah, no kidding. So grounding techniques, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like a lot of techniques to help you be in the present moment, like really take you back to like this moment. Like you're talking about the feeling of your gloves, looking at the texture of people's clothes, for example. It's just really, how can we focus even on the tiniest things right in front of me to bring me back here, rather than sort of be off in a different space. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's kind of what it's just to keep me present in the moment. Because if I start thinking about the outcome of the match, then I've already lost it half the time. Or I've gotten myself so pissed off that if I lose by 1 point, I'm like so pissed off for the next one that I actually trash the girl. And like, I feel kind of bad afterwards. But during it, I'm so mad that I can't wind myself down, until I had to have my coach one time physically grab me and go, Hannah, you're done. You can take your gear off. And I'm like, oh, and I'm pissed off still because I lost. But yeah.
That's really... I was just gonna say, yeah, that's really interesting that you sort of almost, I don't know if it's a blackout, but it sounds like you just kind of like
tunnel vision. I'm just just tunnel vision. I just know outside blinders, nothing. Because I used to be the kid, again, ADHD, distracted. I'm doing my form and I'd look over at my coach, or I'd look over there and I'm not pretending like I'm fighting people. Like if a form is like you're fake fighting, it's air fighting. That's what the simplest way to describe it. And I would look everywhere. And my coach was like, you're losing points because you look everywhere. You need to look at the fake person you're fighting. So it's kind of taught me to keep the tunnel vision in and kind of understand, stay in the moment of what you're doing right now. Because as soon as I hear the coach or like the ref go fight, or as soon as I hear the bell ding, I'm already tunnel vision. I'm in and I don't hear anyone outside. If I can hear you outside of a fight, you're lucky. Because I tone out everybody except certain voices.
It's really interesting, and I'm sure that's taken a lot of training and just a number of matches to be able to really hone that skill. And something that you said that's really interesting is not thinking about the outcome, or not tying your outcome to your skills. Like so take me through a little bit about like what that means and how you've been able to develop that over time. Because it's something that I've heard a few times from some of the high performance coaches where they talk about, we've been taught to think about the outcome over and over and over again type of thing. But a lot of the most successful people, especially athletes, they don't think about the outcome whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So take me through a little bit about what that means.
Yeah. So again, if we're backtracking to when I first started and I was winning so much, I tied my expectation of, oh, if I'm winning, I'm good. If I'm not winning, I'm not good. So to the point where I would be crying that I didn't win. Every time I lost, I would cry. And I was so upset to the point where I actually got in trouble by my coach because I threw my helmet at my bag because I was so pissed off because I lost the match. And it just, and then I felt like bad and I was like, I'm not good. It's just my self-confidence went to the trash. I was like, hey, well, if I'm not winning, I'm not good. But I was good at club. I was consistent at the club, but it was as soon as I lost outside of it and there was a medal or a award tied to it, that's where I was like, oh, I'm not good at this anymore then. Like my jiu-jitsu, I was not confident in fighting like blue belts or purple belts, and I was just still my little white belt, just barely going to blue belts, and I was just like, oh, my skills suck. I don't think I deserve this stripe. I don't think I deserve this belt. And it went from Kempo as well and being kind of, oh, I'm not that good, but then I'd fight black belts and I'd win, and I'm like, oh, I'm still scared to fight them. And then to the point where I had to go, no, you know how to fight them. You won on purpose. You won by a 5-point spread on purpose. You know what you're doing. But it took that kind of confidence building over time of, I have the skill, I have the technique and all that. Like, I just got to allow myself to accept that I can do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's, even in that short description, you explained very clearly how, tying the outcome to your competency basically can be sort of detrimental to your self-image and your self-belief, and like immediate, like over time, just very quickly going down that rabbit hole, being like, I don't deserve this at all. Like, I don't deserve this belt. I don't deserve that. Like, I'm scared to fight people and all of these things. So, tell me what your mindset is now, and how have you shifted that? Because obviously it's I think it's very easy for people to see, oh, like outcome right there. Like, oh, I want to win the Stanley Cup, or, oh, I want to, win gold in Paris 2024, for example. So like, how is it that you've separated the outcome from like your skills, the outcome from your level of competency as a human and as a fighter? How have you been able to do that over time?
So over time, as during COVID, we didn't have any tournaments. So taking tournaments out of the equation was a big, like, change factor for me because I'm so used to tournaments all the time and going. I'd have at least 3 a month, like when I was in the competition season, and kind of taking it a step back. And I was mostly training jiu-jitsu at the time, but it was understanding of, oh, I'm getting this theory down. Yeah, I may have gotten into bad positions, but I thought 3 moves ahead. I've never thought 3 moves ahead. And to the point of, okay, well, what if I did this from here? And my coach being like, oh, that's really smart. That's very creative of you. And just a lot of positive feedback from the very good coaches. I have awesome coaches. Like, I can't blame anything on any one of them. They've always kind of blessed me with some form of understanding and confidence in myself because they all believed in me, even when I wasn't believing in me. Like, I can say for my dad would be count as one of my coaches. So would my mom. But yeah, it took a lot of looking at myself in the mirror and saying, I am strong, I am smart, I am knowledgeable in what I'm doing. And it took a lot of affirmations and kind of mantras to kind of get me going again, to be like, I know what I'm doing. I can look at this fight and I can go, I can do that, but this is how I would do it. And it kind of helped build my confidence over time. I'd watch a lot of jiu-jitsu and everyone else is rolling. I'm taking a break and I watch how they do it. And I'm like, okay, you can do this from there. You can do that from there. And I'm coaching at the same time with some of them because I know they're newbies and I'm like, okay, I got to help you out here. But I make sure it's very specific to the point of, okay, I need your right hand posted on their neck. I need your left hand to push their leg away. Like, it took, and it's figuring out their arms and limbs and where they are. But then I'm like, okay, well, I'm pretty smart if I can figure out which limb needs to go where. And it's just a lot of self-confidence building I've done for the last little bit. And I think it's, again, sports psychologists are pretty good if you find the one you connect with, because that's who helped me with all these techniques and building affirmations and all that stuff. So yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. And it again sounds like, doing this consistently over time is what allowed you to develop it. It's not about, self-talk or doing affirmations, once a week or once a month or when you're feeling down. It's about sort of doing them every day to build that self-belief over time. Am I correct?
That's where the discipline comes in.
Yeah.
Some days I didn't want to tell myself that. I'm like, oh my God, I sucked today. But you're like, no, but what did I learn from this? Pick at least one thing. What is one thing I learned from this today? So yeah. I could praise a lot of my gratitude journal I do towards bedtime. And I'm like, yes, okay, if I might had a bad day, but what's like at least 3 things I can pick that I did well today or that I enjoyed and made me happy today?
I love that. Yeah. That's really cool. This just reminds me of something. Have you seen the movie King Richard?
No.
No, it's about Venus and Serena Williams.
Okay.
And how they grew up and how their dad like really pushed them. And I watched the movie on Thursday on my flight from Edmonton to Boston. It's about just under 2.5 hours. It was like I'm not a huge movie person. I could not take my eyes off it. I was like you, like tunnel vision, like just watching and just
snacks
it was
go
amazing.
By and you miss it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like literally people were like walking by me or like somebody was like, hey, I need to get back in my seat because I'm, done using the bathroom. I was just like, huh? What? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I was just in the movie and that doesn't really happen very often. And literally that day when I got home at like, I don't know, 5:00. I was like to my wife, I'm like, Shelby, like, can we watch this movie tonight? Like, do you want to do a movie night? Let's watch this one. And we watched it and it's an incredible movie. And in it, I mean, it was all about how Venus and Serena Williams became like the incredible and iconic tennis players that they are. And in that, their dad was very adamant on not like he took them out of junior tournaments, even though everybody was like, no, junior tournaments is the only way that they can be successful. Like this is the only way, this is the path. And he was like, well, I need to prioritize like my daughters over early success because until they have the foundations, it's going to lead them to burnout if you just keep pounding them them into all of these junior tournaments. And it happened with a couple of the other young women who were training. And it was that break that allowed them to focus so much on their skills and just be in practice, allowed them to focus so much on their skills that when they finally went into matches 2 or 3 years later, they were like the most confident that they could possibly be because they focused on the skills. So when you were talking about that, I was like, man, these two things are like really relatable,
You're reminding me of another movie I watched. It's called Dangle, and it's an Indian wrestling movie, but it's like the same thing with the dad, but instead he put them in too early and then needed to backtrack to coach his daughters again, because as soon as he let them go, the coach is very negative on them, and they got down and they weren't winning. So as the dad got back, put confidence in them and belief, and they started doing well, and she ended up winning, like, I think the Pan Am Wrestling Championships, or I think it was the Commonwealth Cup. She won gold in it, and it's a really good movie. It's based off a true story, but nice. I think that's what called, I'm relating. Dangle, Dangle. Yep.
Nice. That's really interesting. I'll have to check that one out for sure. But yeah, a lot of like really interesting sort of pieces to this puzzle. And again, sort of not only focusing on those sort of skills rather than the outcome, but also like really focusing inward and being able to sort of develop that self-confidence over time with having the discipline to like tell yourself, hey, force yourself, what did I learn today? Even though you're like, this was a terrible day. Or I was awful this day, which is really, really interesting. And has obviously, been a big contributing factor to help you sort of get to where you are. we don't have time to really dive into this, but
Yeah.
you're also a coach, right? You've also
Yeah.
like gone from, being in MMA for 11 years to also coaching people, sometimes people that are like double your age because you're only 19, which has
Yep.
also got to be, a really interesting challenge. And it sounds like from coaching, when you're able to sit there and almost dissect the way that somebody's moving and be like, no, time out. You have to place your left hand here and your right hand has to do this at the same time. Like, has doing that helped you become a better fighter as well?
Yeah, because again, it's a constant watching of other videos and people and dissecting videos, but now you're doing in real time with people who don't have as much knowledge behind it as you do, so you have to break it down cookie cutter. If you can break it down and I can explain it to a 5-year-old, I can explain it to a 60-year-old. So it's just as simple as that, as maybe, oh, I'm having someone, I need you to step in this way, but I don't need you to step side, I need you to step front, like to cut the angle. That's what I was doing last week with teaching the group, is making sure we're cutting and stepping in the right way, but kind of, again, dissecting it and breaking it down. Maybe if I explain it one way and they don't pick it up on, maybe I'd try explaining it just a little bit differently. Maybe that person will understand, but the same way I explained it the first time is understood by maybe another set of people. It's just, breaking it down and understanding and seeing your kind of outside perspective of, okay, I want to put myself in this person's shoes, and then try and explain it to them like, hey, let's try this instead of that and see how you feel with it. Because maybe sometimes it's like, oh, they already have a background. Maybe they don't want to change too much. And you're like, okay, I recommend it to you. If you want it, take it, put it in your basket and keep it. If you don't want it, just leave it on the shelf. Like, it's all you pick and choose for what you want. But no, I have a pretty good group of people that don't really undermine me, but it's a lot of I should say, new people that come into the gym. They don't know me yet. And they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to listen to a girl. I don't know if I want to listen to a 19-year-old girl, especially. Like, you may look like you're smart, but I'm going to hold off for a little bit.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And especially, I mean, like you mentioned earlier, you're like, I'm 100 pounds. You're like 100 pounds, 19-year-old girl. And like somebody new comes into the gym and they're like, wait, hold on a second. That's my teacher? Like,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
but like, I'm sure very quick.
Yeah. Sorry, I've had a lot of people pick on me because they're like, oh, she's small and I'm going to pick on her and like fight her and like boost my confidence and ego here. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to let you do that and just undermine me for your success. Like, come on.
I love that. That's awesome. Like I said, I'm sure that you have some people come in and be like, wait, that's my coach. And then very quickly like, oh, okay, that's my coach.
Yeah. I'm like, I know I have a good gym. The butts don't stay long. They're usually the ones that come in with big egos. Either they squish their egos and they stay and kind of calm down, or their egos get popped and they leave. It's kind of 50-50. You choose what you want. If you want to adapt, you can adapt.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I mean, you've said a couple times in the last like minute or two that it's up to them, right? Like whatever coaching advice you give to them, they can choose to put it in their basket or to put it on the shelf. And again, like you come in with an ego and it's either, all right, you check yourself and adapt, or, this isn't going to be the place for you. So at the end of the day, it's all up to them whether they make the decision or not.
Yep. That's what I've spent the last little bit doing, is I don't take the expectations or opinions of others onto myself. And if I do give advice, it's making sure that I gave the best advice I could. If you want to take it, go ahead. If not, I will not take offense to it.
Yeah, no kidding. And sir, and last question before, technically it's the second last question, because I want to ask one more thing before I ask you the sort of final question. So in terms of expectations of others, how is it that you maintain this sort of peace within yourself, right? I'm sure that, especially again, training for the Olympics and whatnot, there's got to be expectations that you hear on a regular basis from people. So how do you sort of push those aside and keep your vision and what you want to do, like in focus, in check for yourself?
Yeah. So I'm not big into like the religious faith side, but I'm like spiritual. Like I like believing there's a purpose and reason for everything that's happening in your life. So if something's happening and it's not kind of going the right way, or I'm forcing too much for it to happen, maybe it's not the right time. Maybe I need to take 2 steps back, just kind of play around like I am right now, working mostly technique and stuff. And if it's my time for an opportunity or a fight to come along, it will come along. when I'm ready to take it on. And whatever lesson comes from it is whatever lesson comes from it. Because I used to come in and be like, I'm expecting to win, I'm doing all this, and I'd have so much stress on myself that I was just all the time I was stressed, and I just could not relax and have fun and enjoy life. Because I'm 19, I need to have fun. I don't need to act like I'm 40 years old and like stressed out about everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's really interesting, and I'm really happy that you've been able to develop that. And it sounds like you have an incredible sort of support system around you, from your mom and dad to your coaches and to the people at your gym. It sounds like you've surrounded yourself with a lot of people that help you to remain positive and also like help you to get better every single day. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, they're awesome. I gotta say, they're the best. I love every single one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just quickly before I get into the last question, what club are you at? And we know, I just realized that I didn't even ask you like where you're training at all or anything like that. So
yeah, so I trained Shaolin Kempo at a place called Spirit of the Dragon. This is all in Regina, Saskatchewan, by the way. I trained jiu-jitsu for Queen City Martial Arts, QCMA. I do boxing at Lonsdale Boxing Club. I do my Muay Thai at Ascendant. And everyone's like, oh, well, why aren't you at just one single club? I'm like, because every single one has something for me to pick and choose at. Everyone knows just a little bit more everywhere else. So I don't limit myself to one gym. I'm always willing to expand and try different gyms and figure out who has what I need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, spending all the time at one place, like you're learning from a certain amount of people. They might not be specialists in everything, of course, right? So going to different people and getting that sort of specialist training definitely makes sense. So that's great. And Regina, Saskatchewan, fellow Canadian. I'm rocking the
You got the Canadian shirt here. Nice.
Yeah. They're on sale at Sport Check. This was $6.
Oh, well, that's probably that would probably be like 15 here. Like our taxes still super high.
Oh, yeah. Well, anyways, if you want to check it out. But anyways, so getting into the last question here. So I want to ask you, we've been through a lot about your story, a lot of really amazing lessons along the way. My last question for every single guest is, what one piece of advice would you give to somebody who is either stuck in their comfort zone, or for somebody who just wants to get more out of life, right? Like they know they want bigger and better things, but they might not necessarily have the courage to take that first step into pursuing that. What would be your piece of advice for someone like that?
So, this is the best because it's a note my dad wrote to myself, and it's a little part of the note, but the first step is the hardest step, but everyone that follows becomes easier as you go. So it's just going out there and trying it. Like, just shoot your shot, see what happens. Like, this literally is probably the biggest thing I'd say, because I have so many little kids and students that are hesitant and to fight or to join in or don't know what's going on. And I'm like, okay, that's all good, but you're here. You showed up. You're trying. That's all good. The next step will be easier. You'll know a little bit more for next class, and maybe a little bit more for next class. Like, just taking the first step, which is, again, probably the hardest for most people, but then just start going and walking, and then sometimes it just turns into a run, and you're running, you're going with it. So it's just, take the first step. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, take that first step. The others will be a little bit easier, and you'll start to build that momentum. Absolutely love that. Love that message. Well, Hannah, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Again, some amazing messages along the way, and I definitely learned something from you. And I know that you're going to inspire somebody from somewhere around the world. So again, thank you so much for your time and embracing discomfort and vulnerability, and being on here to share your story.
Thank you. I'm so happy you allowed me this opportunity for us to chat and do all this.
Yeah, it's been a ton of fun, and I'm going to follow along your journey. And for anybody listening on the podcast, where can they find you online?
So online, my Instagram is Slater, SLATER.MMA. And that's my Instagram. I just posted today in the Zoom chat that I'm going to attempt to post more for sure, because I'm like, I don't post enough, but I know I need to post more. And Facebook is just Hannah Slater, and then Slater-athlete. And you should be seeing me. I think it's me doing the splits. So yeah.
Wow.
I know. Great banner picture.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome. So at slater.mma for Instagram and Hannah Slater dash athlete.
Yeah.
Is that it? Yeah.
That's
awesome.
for Facebook.
On Facebook. Fantastic. Well, Hannah, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your time, and we're going to stay in touch, and I'm going to follow your journey wherever it leads you. So
yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it and that it inspired you on your journey to living your best life. Now make sure to check out the show notes below for a rundown of today's show with all the important links, such as where to find the guest online and important resources that they may have mentioned. Also make sure to share this episode with a friend or family member and subscribe so you get the notifications when new episodes are released. I absolutely love hearing feedback from you guys, so I encourage you to share a review on the platform you're listening on and let me know what your biggest takeaway was from today's episode. Now it's time to go out and build the life of your dreams one step at a time. And remember, the only way to be comfortable is to be uncomfortable first.